Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Sam. I'm the managing director of AYT. This is Jay here. He's
Hi.
the reviews editor. So we're joined by the one and only Rob Madge. Hello, Rob.
Oh yeah, you're right.
You're right.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
so Rob is an actor who's been performing much of their life. They've appeared in the West End in Mary Poppins, Les Mis, and Oliver. But if you're on social media, no doubt you'll be familiar with their recent starring role as Out of Time Glinda,
Yeah.
then Kristen Chenoweth. Oh my God.
The highlight of my career. I've
Amazing.
retired now.
Yeah,
No point continuing. My
yeah,
life is
yeah.
peaked.
Should we just stop it right there? That's it.
Yeah, end of interview.
Uh,
Done. See you
Amazing
later.
interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Um,
Thanks for having me.
uh, Today we're here to talk about your next project, your new, very exciting project.
Yeah.
My sons are queer, but what can you do? I adored it and related to it massively.
Oh.
Can you just tell us a little bit about the show? Just tell the viewers just a little bit about it, please.
Yeah. I used to put on lots of shows at home in my living room, as lots of queer people did, as lots of people in theatre used to do, and they're all quite ridiculous and very bizarre and absurd. All the things that I'd make my family do, like wear wigs and use a smoke machine and turn the lounge into Ariel's grotto and all of that stuff. And we've got it all on video. And I thought, there's just a fun show in that concept of taking everyone back to those living room performances, and maybe hopefully remind everybody why we fell in love with this industry in the first place, and also to remember those little queer kids that we used to be, and to be proud of who we were back then and who we've become. And I think we often neglect or forget about those earlier formative years, for various reasons.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's important to be proud of those little kids that wore the wigs in their kitchen or whatever, and look at what's happened now.
Yeah, love that. So can you tell us a little bit about the journey from it being, I guess, nostalgia to
Mm.
10 Vine theatre stage?
Yeah, that's exactly how it started. It was nostalgia. It was wishing I was back on a stage, and everyone was trapped at home, and we couldn't do any of that stuff. But there were just all of these old home VHS tapes lying about the house that I hadn't seen in years. So Dad got like a VHS player off eBay in lockdown, and whoever sold that to my dad, thank you. We've milked it for all it's worth.
Yeah.
And we just started watching these, and I just thought they were funny, so I shared them on Twitter. I think was where I first started putting them up, and people liked them. But it was really the response I got of people saying that, my God, my family would not have indulged me as much as yours did. I wasn't as lucky to be raised in such a supportive environment. And that's really, I had no idea of making it a show up until I was getting those comments, because at first I was like, these are just funny little videos. But obviously there's something in it that, I don't know, it was so normal for me that it's so sad that that is such an otherworldly concept to something that I thought was just a funny little video. It actually means more to some people, seeing a different side of the coin. And I just wanted to make a more visible statement with the play, to sort of say that it can be very easy if you let it. It's just sort of a bit of fun. Just get on board, support your children, and yeah, that's all it is really. It was all those comments coming through that just made me think someone should put this on, and I will be the one to do it.
Yeah. So you had a debate, didn't you? Was that like
Mm.
before the show? Was that during like you?
This was when I was like writing it. So
Yeah.
I was at the village pub, and I live in the middle of nowhere. So like all the locals, all the farmers and the those kinds of people. Anyway, so I'm at the village pub, straight pub. I've missed all the gay bars over this past year. So I was at this straight pub, and bless them, they are interested in, like, oh, Rob does theatre, so they try and sound a bit interested as to what I'm doing, and they're like, so what have you been in? Have you been in anything I know? All of those kind of questions. Have you been in Coronation Street? All of that stuff. And I said, well, no, I'm actually writing a play called My Sons Are Queer, but what can you do? And they're like, queer? I don't think we need to see any of that. So they ask a bit more about the project, and I say, well, it's about me putting on shows when I was a kid, and they say, well, that's enough then, isn't it? That's a good concept. Why do you need to be queer? And I'm like, well, I am, so that's a very important part of the story. And of course, I was just a child at the time, but knowing who I am today is a product of that child and how I was raised. I think it's really important that the queerness is visible, and I'm just so sick of queerness being seen as some kind of, you know, alternative to a bit of fun. It's like, why can't you just have a bit of fun with a show putting on shows in your living room? Why do you have to bring queer into it? Well, that can be fun as well. That can be just as entertaining and as joyful, more so. so yeah, I needed to make that very, very visible from the off, really.
Totally, yeah.
That's that actually brings me to one of my questions, because I was going to ask if you've had negative questions based on the title with the word queer in the title of the play. And I mean, I myself had a conversation. We're currently living with my nan, by the way.
Oh, that's lovely.
Out of lockdown. So we've had many conversations, and one of the things my nan just doesn't understand is the positive word queer.
Yeah.
Which we even had to have a conversation this morning about it.
Yeah.
And how trying to explain how our community have taken that word back, you know, and even myself struggled with using the word a long time ago, you know, and it's only
me too.
You know, and having friends that like almost teach you, you know, it's okay, we've claimed that this word back, and it's not something to be ashamed of anymore, it's something to be proud of. And
exactly.
Had any of the conversations along those lines?
Very, very similar. And it's tricky, isn't it? Because we always have to remember the history and how some people haven't had access to our community as easily as we do, and they won't have seen that trajectory of how the word's been used and against us, and now we have reclaimed it. But you do have to be within, or at least have a great insight of, the LGBTQ plus community to see how that term has evolved. And if you don't have that, I think we have to go easy on a lot of people. I think there's such a common thing where we expect everyone to already know and to be educated, and that's just not productive, it's not fruitful, and we can't expect that of everybody. So those easy conversations where we ease them into the whole idea are so important, and I've had many of those because again, I was very defensive at first with this person who was like, why do you have to talk about queerness? And I'm like, well, because I'm very proud of it, blah, 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 and got very angry. And then you have to sort of reflect and go, well, this person comes from a place where it was used as a slur, and hasn't seen how it's evolved since then. So you always have to take everything into consideration. But yes, so many conversations like that. I mean, I would not have written a show with that title in 2 years ago, even 1 year ago, maybe. It's really in this past year that I have finally come into my own with, you know, all the queerness and the pride I have in that. Being in lockdown really gave me the opportunity to do that research and to do that examination within myself of who I want to be. And before that, I think I'd have been the same. I'd have been like, I don't want to address that part of my life because, you know, we don't talk about that. Yeah. But I mean, got no energy for shame really anymore.
No, I think that's how we've felt, haven't we? Because I think it's been tough because we've lived in London for like 12, 14 years.
Long time.
Yeah.
And then now all of a sudden we're not in London. It is difficult, you know, because you have left your home life, and become the person you feel to be, and then all of a sudden you come back and you feel like you're censoring again.
Completely. It's a culture shock, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a massive shock, and that's it's something that one of the reasons why I was so excited to go to London. Every now and then when I pop back down, I'm like, thank goodness. It's like it feels safer. And you know, my family are wonderful, but outside of this front door, I wouldn't feel remotely comfortable leaving the house wearing the clothes that I want to wear. So
Yeah.
it is all locational, and this ain't the one. So I fully empathise and understand your situation.
Yeah. But how important do you think it is to engage with people that perhaps, you know, don't have your lived experiences or just don't really understand it, and not necessarily to educate? It's not our job to really educate, or is it our job? I mean, I don't know.
No, it's a fine line, isn't it? It's what you as an individual think is worth expending energy on, is the way I always look at it. I'm never going to go about life being like, I'm not going to teach people because I need to preserve my energy and they can read a book. Sometimes I will feel that way, and it depends on how someone has approached the situation. It's all in tone. It's all in how everyone approaches the questions differently, don't they? Some people will be like, I don't get this. And some people are like, I'm trying to learn. And if I get that, well, I'll try and help people as much as I can. But you're right, we can't spend every hour of our lives educating and informing when Google exists and when, you know, there's so many resources out there. So I just try and direct people to those. But I do think those conversations are important, provided that you're talking to people who are willing to learn. It's people that are, you know, choosing to live in ignorance and choosing to be hateful and disrespectful that I've just got no time for. And they can join the party when they want to, but I'm not going to waste any time trying to convince anyone.
Yeah, and it's also really important as well. Like, there's just such a cancellation culture at the moment, isn't there? So it's like saying, you said something wrong, they've expressed some little bit of ignorance, let's just cancel them completely. When actually, you know, we need open and just more expressive and just like have these conversations, because otherwise, like, how are we going to have more progress outside of our own bubble? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's a really dangerous thing, just living in echo chambers, because that's not the real world. And you can filter your Instagram and your Twitter feeds to suit you, but when you log off, you're not going to be faced with the support that you get on there for posting a photo in a pair of heels. If the photo that I post wearing the clothes I want to wear could get X amount of likes, but could also get some serious abuse on a tube. It's a very weird thing. So you need to approach everything with caution, I think, when it comes to that. And also, there's a difference between ignorance and willful ignorance, isn't there? It's those that choose to not learn, I have a problem with, and those that are just not there yet but are trying. You know, patience, we'll get there, I'm sure. I hope.
Yeah. So your director, Luke Shepherd, so firstly, how much involvement did you have with bringing them on board, and also how important was it for you to have someone that kind of got your story taking on that role?
Great question. I originally was like, I don't need a director. I know what I want to do. I'll just put it on, and, you know, as I always would as a child, just take control of the entire thing. And it quickly became clear to me that, you know, a bit narcissistic. Collaboration is key. And having that extra pair of eyes has just changed it massively. And it's been so beneficial hearing Luke's stories as well, and how they come into play with mine, and how they interweave. I mean, it's crazy knowing how many of us did the same thing when we were kids, and we all probably felt very alone at the time doing it. I know I did anyway. I thought I could never talk about this at school. Like, if I told my friends that I dressed up as Ariel over the weekend, I'd get bullied left, right, and centre. But there were so many of us doing it at the same time. has been a real eye-opener. And having Luke on board with that has been just amazing. I worked with him when I was a child, actually. He was the kids director in Matilda, which was which was, I mean, bloody ages ago. I was about to say it was wonderful, but I can't remember it. I'm sure he was great. He's great now, I know that for sure. And when Paul suggested Luke, I was like, yes, oh my God, perfect. And he just gets it. And that's so important to have, you know, a predominantly queer team as well that know the story, and it could be their story as much as mine. Feels quite special.
Yeah. So what about the Turbine then? Like, why this space? Did you have...
Yeah, I love the Turbine space in general, always have done. I think it's a great venue. I love where it's placed. I love it being by the river at summer. That was just like one of the goals of mine. Sounds stupid, but I was like, oh, just imagine people coming to see a show in summer, being by the river. It would be just a lovely atmosphere. And also, I've always admired Paul and Paul's work. And Paul did a tweet back in August or July saying, I'm looking to work with new people. And I just thought, well, it's quite rare that producers are so open. And I was like, well, he's literally opened the door for me to send him a DM. So I slid into the DMs. I said, I've written a show. And he said, let's have a meeting. Let's do it. So I was like, really? Okay. Are you sure? And then he's been on board ever since. And I just think it's a fab venue for where it's at the minute. I'm very happy to be there.
Wonderful. So, I mean, obviously the environment within your home when you were growing up was like very, you know, was great for you, very supportive, very nurturing. But what really struck a chord with me when reading the play, and what I really related to, was how much your light was, you know, almost dimmed when outside influences. How do you think that your family essentially managed to push through the crap and ignore the pressures that society puts on people to follow gender norms and expectations?
I think they just realised very early on, had the common sense to realise that all of that stuff is nonsense. That is something that people are projecting onto me, onto the family, and it doesn't have to be our experience. So they can say what they like, but it's not going to stop me putting on that aerial bra and that wig. I'm still going to sing Part of Your World in the living room. I mean, unstoppable, really. I would be doing those shows whether everyone liked it or not. So I think my family just had to go along with it. I always say, like, they had no choice in the matter. And they were very good with facilitating all of my ambition. But all of that other stuff just has to become white noise. And I think a lot of families will let that stuff affect how they raise their kids or how they approach life, because they want their kids to be happy. They want their kids to feel safe, and they don't want anyone bullying them. So I think a common misstep is to censor that in order to preserve the safety of the child, when that really is just delaying the inevitable. In my opinion, it just makes the journey so much longer, because they will get to a point where they are very proud of themselves eventually. It will just take longer. So you may as well just start it off young and just let them know from the beginning that they can be whatever they want to be, and all that other stuff that they will be faced with in the world is nonsense. And they can, you know, it just makes life easier to navigate. It doesn't make the external stuff any easier to manage, but it does make a difference when you do have that support. You always know that you can go back to your family and be loved, essentially. It makes a difference.
Yeah. I mean, my experience growing up is fairly similar. Like I was allowed to play with, so I've got a younger sister, so I was allowed to play with dolls. I was allowed to choreograph dances with her for our babysitters when they came around, which they obviously enjoyed very much.
Love that.
Lots of stuff like that. But I mean, Jay, your experiences were quite the opposite.
So I also grew up with a sister as well. Me and my sister would play in secret. Whenever mum and stepdad were not home, then we would play with the toys together, and as soon as the parents were home, it was like back to separate rooms, and no one can ever know that I was playing with your Polly Pockets, even though I compared them to my Mighty Maxes, you know. And that's just the way it was. Everything was always a secret. So like when I read your piece, it just filled me with excitement to see something that's so refreshing, and not all woe is me. And like you said, like, it's important to speak about the hard times, but there is also a lot of light as well in growing up as a queer person. And we don't have to always just focus on the sad times to tell our whole story.
Completely. It's just there's such a lack of queer joy, I find, in stories, and if you can't see it in stories, if you can't see it on your TV screens or on stage or on films, if you don't see the joy that we have, how is anyone gonna know that we have it? Because otherwise we'll just be hiding it forever, because we're not seeing it reflected back anywhere. So it does feel like it's something that, should you talk about the queerness? I don't know, because the only queerness I see is all these traumatic tales. Is this valid as a queer story if it's joyful? Of course it is, you know. It's just because we don't see enough of it in order to know for a fact that it is a queer story. So just there are of course joyful queer stories out there, but there's just not enough of them.
And I think that goes back to parents as well. I think, like, my mum's always tried to be as supportive as she thought she was being, you know, but I think it's hard for her when she doesn't really know any other queer children.
Exactly.
And or people, and she's just in her head thinking, I don't want you to be unhappy. I don't want you to.
Absolutely.
You know, but different shouldn't be seen as a negative.
No, I think, it does stem back to, why aren't we seeing these stories then? Why aren't we seeing the simplicity of our lives as well as everything else? I think a problem with queerness in general is that it can be seen as academic and as a mature thing. Like, you'll go to, I don't know, you'll read a book about it when you're older and then you'll be educated. There aren't, like, picture books for kids showing two same-sex parents, stuff like that will make such a difference. And I got one sent in the post to me the other day by somebody who watches my videos, who is an author and has written a kids book called My Daddies, and it's just glorious. And if those kind of books are in schools, it won't be such an otherworldly concept anymore, rather than it being something that you learn when you grow up. But when you're at school, we don't talk about it. I mean, still feeling the effects of Section 28 even today, you know?
It's so damaging. And that's where bullying comes in as well, you know, schools, because you go through all of school and nobody is aware of any queer people. You know, obviously children go, well, you're different, so you're automatically a target for bullying, where if everybody is taught about everybody, then there will be nobody who stands out as being different in a negative way.
Exactly that. That's exactly it. It's easy targets. That's such a good way of looking at it. One person being a bit different to anyone else is not ever celebrated, really, is it? It's like, why aren't you like us? Because I feel like
your play does. I do feel like when reading your play, I feel like you are celebrating queer people, and, you know, and I think it's great.
Well, that's nice, thank you. That's what I hoped anyway. I never wanted it to be like, I did have this anxiety of, I'm sitting people down in an audience for an hour to watch videos and to talk about how great my family are. I mean, this looks like just bragging. So I really hope it just, instead of that, it's more of a light and a bit of joy.
Who did you have in mind, if anyone, when you're writing it, like, sort of audience? Because, like, predominantly it is joyful, but then you have the bits where you, like, your light, you tell the reader or the audience member that your light was dimmed, and that is kind of like, it seems to me like it's quite informative and saying, like, this is what happens to queer kids. This is what happens to us. So who did you have in mind when you were writing it, if anyone?
it changed over the course of writing it, to be honest. It started off being a play for stagey people who put on shows in their living room, and as it evolved, it turned into queer people. It's a story for you, and then by the end of it, it's become I don't want to give anything away, but by the end of it, it really is, you know, a lesson for those that aren't in the community, and why aren't you when you've just seen an hour of how much fun we can have. So that's sort of where it ended up, and yeah, it was important to me to show that, not picking on anyone in the audience, but if you act this way, if you say this one tiny little thing that you could say could really change things for someone. And yeah, so everyone in the audience that watches, I don't want to feel like I'm going, don't be like this, but I do hope people that aren't so informed of what to say and what not to say sort of leave going, okay, so I won't say that. I think, yeah, it's important that was made quite clear as I was writing, and it wasn't meant to be like that as we went, as I started the whole thing, but as I started discovering all of these, you know, all of these school reports and this, that, and the other, it suddenly triggered a lot of a lot of memories. I was like, I had such a great childhood, which I did for the most part, but there were things that that you sort of forgot about. I forgot about anyway, and then I'm faced with it again. I'm like, okay, I need to make it clear that that's not what you should do.
Really interesting, because we obviously had very different upbringings.
Mm-hmm.
Your school reports, from what I read in the script, literally mirror some of mine.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've spoken to quite a lot of people who say very, very similar things. Just it blows my mind. I really hope that those kind of things aren't said anymore. Fingers crossed again.
Yeah, definitely. And then that brings a responsibility to schools as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To step up and not say those things.
Yeah, and when people do, you make sure that, you know, the blame is placed in the right place. Yeah, I'm sure it's getting much better, but that was my experience anyway. Yeah.
Actually, that brings me on to another question. Both Sam and I are really wanting to have children in the future.
Oh, amazing.
Obviously, there's a long journey and many challenges ahead in order to do that.
Yeah.
But I think one of our worries is, if we were to bring children up to just be themselves like we would want to do, it's once they leave our house and they're out of your hands, how do you deal with that? And I just wondered, do you see yourself having children in the future, and do you have similar concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. I do, yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to see, looking back on this play that I've written now, if I ever am a parent, because I'll probably disagree with so much of it, and I'll suddenly understand why so many parents are apprehensive of letting their kids be themselves. Because yeah, it's definitely easier said than done at the minute, not being a parent. So I'll probably look at it a bit differently when I'm a bit older. But I don't know, you know. I think everyone just has to trust that no matter what you do, your kids will find their own path in life. No matter how hard you try and push them in one direction, they'll probably go in the opposite direction. And just not be so afraid of that, because life is not easy for anybody. It's cruel, and like there's no way that even if you protect your kids as much as you can from the world, there's no way that it won't affect them at some point in their lives. Someone will always have something to say. So it sounds really negative. I promise I'm trying not to be. But I think it's just the idea that you can't protect everybody from everything. All you can do is help them on their own journey, and support that, because they'll go on that journey anyway, with or without you. So just be there for them, and prepare them as much as they can for what some people might say, but that's no reflection on them, on the child. That's just people with too much time on their hands being hateful, you know.
Yeah, and just see kids as individuals, because I think a lot of people, a lot of parents just kind of see them as mini versions of them, and then they just push that onto them. And it's just something that I hadn't really thought about too much before, but I've recently been listening to Sophie Ellis-Bex's podcast, which is very good.
Love her.
She's great, and she's got about 12,000 kids, and she talks a lot. She talks a lot about them and just about how they're all very different people. So I've really, you know, taken that on board. And it's just so obvious, but it's still like, yeah, actually, they may be your children that have, you know, been produced by you. Maybe not for everyone if you adopt, for example, but, you know, it's important to see them as individual human beings, individual people. Yeah, totally.
Completely. Because, I mean, if I was a mini version of my parents, I would not be the person that I am today. So yeah, completely that. Individuals, not mini me's.
Yeah. But I mean, I love as well that you say in the play that in terms of like going to drama school and stuff, like that was your decision. And just presume that it's pushy parents.
Always, it does my head in. And I always still feel like awkward talking to people about saying that I was, you know, a child actor, because I think the instant thought is that, oh, were you? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay now? Why were you made to do that? Because I wanted to. I mean, my parents were never remotely interested in theatre. I really don't know where I ever got it from, to be totally honest. But no, I was definitely the pushy child. Is the way I look at it. Because that is a thing. And of course, there's pushy parents, and some kids don't want to do it. But that's not my story anyway.
Just, I mean, we obviously need to see more shows, more things on stage that celebrate queer joy. How do you think we're heading in some sort of positive direction? Like, obviously, your show really is, I think, kicking that off. Now we're going back into live theatre, hallelujah. But do you think we're maybe heading in that direction, or if not, like, what needs to change?
I hope so. I really do hope so. I think if we don't progress from after all the conversations we had last year and this year, if there's no progress after that, what hope do we have? Is the way I'm sort of feeling about it, because never before have we had so much time off and time to reflect and time to have these really important conversations. It hasn't happened before. And probably, hopefully, we won't ever be locked down for so long ever again. So this really has to be a catalyst, I think, for real change in how stories are told and who's telling them and the teams behind them and who you're writing for and who you're performing for, your audience. You need to take all of these things into consideration. Like, it's very important. For me, it's very important that queer stories are told authentically. All stories should be told authentically. And I'm not saying every writer has to have had every single experience that they write about. Not everything needs to turn into an autobiographical piece, you know, but there needs to be at least understanding of that, and not just blind ignorance to, you know, who you're casting and the topics that you're covering. You need to have a real truthful awareness of these things now. And I do think it's heading in that direction because people aren't being quiet about it anymore. I think people actually feel a lot more liberated to be as vocal as they probably wouldn't have been a couple of years ago on social media, etc., about all of these things. So I think that if these mistakes do continue to happen with bad casting choices, it's going to be met with a backlash, and it probably wouldn't have done a couple of years ago. So I think that's where we're at now. I think the mistakes will still be made, but people won't be happy about them, and they'll be vocally unhappy about them. And then maybe in a few years, the mistakes just will stop happening. Because what blows my mind and baffles me completely is that when these mistakes are made, whoever's in charge either isn't aware of or doesn't care about the backlash that they will inevitably have. It's like, what world have you been living in where you think that's acceptable anymore? So I hope that they're just not aware and a bit ignorant and are learning, rather than be like, don't matter, I'll still cast who I want to cast. Because even if you do that, great, but people won't be happy about it.
Yeah, I think it's as well about theatres taking chances. I think a lot of the big theatres have a certain audience that they need to cater to, and they're to divert away from that. So I think if they really want to make a difference and tell less heard voices, and they need to take chances, like, well, maybe we don't care as much about what you think, and we need to think
exactly.
we can find a new audience that will still come and see the shows, you know.
Yes. And again, it ties back into the whole idea of unseen, unheard voices being like academic or elite. Like, why can't those stories just be as universal and as mainstream as the others? It is about theatre taking chances, and I think trusting that if those audiences give it time, actually give it a chance, they'll leave going, oh wow, why have I been avoiding this for so long? It's great, it's brilliant. So
do you think it is an older generation thing as well, to maybe see something maybe that's queer and be like, oh, that's not for me, without really even giving it a chance? You mentioned your granny.
Bless her. I don't know, you know. I think generation plays a huge part in it, because obviously I was never really around when queer was such a prominent slur, and a lot of the older generation were. But I also think it is about who you surround yourself with from an early age. I know that there's people our age who have the mentality of someone much older and dated because of where they've been brought up, who they've been brought up by, the friends that they surround themselves with. And then I know people who are much older than I am who have, you know, the inclusivity of Gen Z. So it's all like, it all interweaves within one another. I think if I hadn't have gone to London at such a young age and stayed here in this tiny village, I would not be the person that I am today. I would have very dated, awful views, I'm sure, but I was lucky enough from an early age to surround myself with different people, and then that in turn, my family learn about that, and we have conversations all the time, and it's a two-way thing then. And now my parents also have my same outlook on life, but that all, I think, stems from the people that we have surrounded ourselves with in different circles. It's lots of things that come into play with that, I think.
Yeah. I feel like we could just talk about this all day, to be honest. Whenever
we could.
Conversations like this, just so much to cover, so much to get angry about.
I know.
You know. I mean, have you got any other questions that you'd like to ask Rob? So, I mean, to kind of finish off this great conversation, could you just tell our viewers, just sum up the show in 5 words, just encourage them to come?
5 words, shorter than the bloody title. It's a mouthful, that title, isn't it?
75 words.
5 words. Celebrate the joy of queerness.
Love it.
Perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
The Turbine, 17th of June to the 3rd of July, right?
That's right.
Brilliant. I'm so excited to go and see it. We're going to have a trip to London, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yay. See you after.
yeah, definitely. Also, I have a confession to make.
Oh.
I don't know how you're going to take this, but
Okay.
I've seen the Cinderella with Brandy in it.
You haven't seen it?
I actually saw it on Disney. So it was actually featured on Disney Plus the other day.
Yeah.
No, I'm not in the mood for this, even though I've been to watch it for ages. So I'm sorry, I had to just get that in there, and I'm really hope you can forgive me.
Well, I hope you don't come to the show now. You're not my audience.
No,
I think I have seen it, so am I allowed?
Oh, honestly, if you think you've seen it, then you're sort of welcome. To be honest, I'm only accepting audience members who are diehard fans. So.
I'm sure we will be once we've seen it properly.
I'm sure it still stands up. Have a look, see if you think. I loved it when I was a kid.
Yeah, and Whitney as well, isn't it? Whitney Houston.
Oh my God, Whitney, fairy godmother. She executive produced the whole shebang. Bernadette Peters is in it. Whoopi Goldberg.
I have to say that's another thing where we have in common, because when I was reading the play, all I could think of was Barbara Windsor. I saw her as fairy godmother in Cinderella when I was a young kid, and I just idolised her. And all through her career, even when I saw her in EastEnders, all I thought was, "You're really the fairy godmother."
The fairy godmother. Oh, I love that. It's always the fairies or the villains in Panto that I'm just like obsessed over.
Yeah, me too.
That's very cool.
What you like.
What we like.
What you like. Well, I mean, so much for joining us. It's been really nice to chat to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Loved this convo.
We need more queer spaces, don't we, other than clubs? I was talking to someone. Like, we need more like community halls or
community.
Let's do bingo in the community hall. I would be so.
Legs 11. It's very true. It is really true. The whole I remember It's a Sin, everyone being stuck at home, and I was like, I wish I could talk to people about this. So then we ended up doing a Zoom with some people where we just spoke on Zoom about It's a Sin and the trauma having watched that, and it was lovely. And I realized I don't do that. I go out with a lot of queer people on the town, go clubbing, but we don't ever talk about everything that we go through. And those spaces would be nice. Yeah, let's go to bingo.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Yeah.
See you there.
All right. Well, have an amazing day. I hope it's sunny there. It's lovely here.
It's not, but thanks for rubbing it in.
I hope you have a great day stuck inside.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.